welcome to Crimes Through Time, snapshots of crime history. Catherine Wilson was born in 1822. At 31, she found her calling as a nurse. At least that was the image she portrayed. In reality, she was an opportunistic serial killer. She would find sick people, befriend them, and manipulate them into writing their wills in her favour, before using her position to kill them. In 1853, Captain Peter Maw advertised for a live-in housekeeper located in Boston, Lincolnshire. Catherine Wilson would be the successful applicant. Peter suffered from gout, so much that his pain was often unbearable. Catherine was compassionate to his suffering, and her role soon expanded into becoming his nurse. His medicine was colchicum, a remedy derived from dried seeds of the autumn crocus. Catherine would administer his doses, and she realised that in small doses it brought pain relief, but it was highly toxic in large doses. As a thank you for her help, Peter made her his sole beneficiary in his will. Once the will was changed, Catherine began to increase his dose. The following October he died. This is believed to be Catherine's first murder. The doctor concluded that he must have been in so much pain he unintentionally took a fatal dose of colchicum. The coroner recorded a verdict of accidental death. Catherine quickly cashed in all assets and money due to her under the will and headed to London. In London, she met and started a relationship with James Dixon. They lodged together at 27 Alfred Place, Bedford Square, just off Tottenham Court Road. Their landlady was 50-year-old Maria Soames, who had recently been widowed. But the union wasn't a happy one. John had a serious drinking problem, which led to volatile arguments between the couple. One night, John went as far as to beat Catherine. In reply, she gave him a large dose of poison. John became very ill. Their landlady was impressed with how well she was nursing her ailing husband. Catherine told her this was just another bout of consumption, a condition he had been battling for years. He died in June 1856, and no one was surprised. A local doctor, Dr. Whitburn, was asked to sign the death certificate, but he declined without a post-mortem. He was not John's usual doctor and couldn't confirm his medical history. Catherine protested, quote, because he, John, had always been horrified at the thought of his body being mutilated. But Dr. Whitburn insisted, and the post-mortem went ahead. Nothing suspicious was found, and the death certificate was signed natural causes. Catherine had got away with it. She played the part of the grieving widow well. Maria Soames provided her with comfort, and the two soon became fast friends. Maria trusted her friend and confided in her that she was to receive a legacy of £9 from an aunt. This seemed enough for Catherine to decide that she would be her next victim. A curious choice, because Maria had children who would inherit her property and several close male relatives that, had she left her estate to a stranger, would have stepped in with court action. Maria returned home after collecting the money and had tea with her daughter. Once her company had left, Catherine invited her into her rooms to drink to her prosperity. The next day, the 16th of October 1856, Maria didn't rise to manage the household chores as was her usual routine. Catherine sent word to Maria's daughter and asked if she might nurse her friend. Not that she waited for permission before insisting she alone care for Maria. She gave her her medicines, made all her food, and attended to her at all times, even sleeping in the chair in her bedroom. On the fourth day, Maria seemed to rally. She had stopped vomiting and was free from pain. Catherine was outwardly happy that her intensive nursing was working, but privately she prepared the final massive dose that would kill her friend. Dr. Whitman attended this death too. He again insisted on a post-mortem, which he conducted himself. Catherine told him that Maria had drank poison to end her life after being jilted by a man who had promised her marriage. The doctor too suspected poison, but he didn't have the skills to prove it. He again found nothing suspicious and signed the death certificate, stating the previously healthy Maria Soames had died of natural causes. The £9 legacy was nowhere to be found, and Catherine produced a letter from the elusive lover. that no one else in Maria's life had heard of, dated just before the alleged suicide, in which he cruelly ended the relationship. She also produced an IOU signed by Maria Soames indicating that she owed Catherine £10. Now, how Catherine came to have £10 to loan Maria, or why, given that she'd just come into money, Maria needed the money, wasn't questioned. In her grief, Maria's daughter settled the debt. It was now time for Catherine to move on, and in 1859 Catherine was living in London but travelling frequently back to Boston, where she had worked for Captain Maw. She was nursing an older lady, Mrs. Jackson. During her last visit, despite her illness, Mrs. Jackson withdrew £120 from her bank account. She would die 4 days later, suffering the usual symptoms of a patient nursed by Catherine. The money and Catherine disappeared immediately. A promissory note was found for the £120. It was a forgery and the names signed were fake. Catherine had found another way to access her victim's money if amending the will would be too suspicious. This sum set Catherine up for the next year. At the end of 1859, Catherine set her sights on her next victim, the aunt of her former lover, James Dixon, 55-year-old Anne Atkinson. Anne would visit Catherine when she would travel to London for business. On this particular visit, £50 was taken from Anne's purse. Suspicion did fall on Catherine, but it didn't stop Anne from visiting again the next year. Mrs. Atkinson and her husband owned a millinery shop in Kirkby Lonsdale in Cumbria and would travel to London to purchase stock for the shop. Catherine suggested she stay with her. By this time, Catherine was living in Loughborough Road, Brixton, with a man named Taylor. The landlady would testify that Anne Atkinson arrived in the best of health, light-hearted and jolly. It took just 2 days for Anne to fall ill, and a telegram was sent to Kirkby Lonsdale informing her husband to come to London at once, for Anne was in grave condition. Despite leaving immediately on the 19th of October to be with his wife, she had passed before he reached her. Catherine knew from past experience that the local doctor would be a problem. He had no knowledge of Anne's medical history and therefore would refuse to sign the death certificate, but this time she was prepared. She played on the deep grief and shock that Anne's husband was in. Catherine told him Anne, in her deathbed, had implored her not to let anyone cut up her body. Mr. Atkinson refused the doctor's permission for post-mortem. Mr. Atkinson did, though, inquire about the hundreds of pounds Anne had brought with her to purchase the stock. Catherine was shocked. Had Anne not written to him to tell him that unfortunately she had been robbed? Feeling unwell on the train travelling between London and Rugby, while resting in the waiting room, the money was taken. Oh, and the large diamond ring Catherine was wearing? That was a gift from Anne, grateful for her friend's care. The Atkinsons were people of means, yet Catherine was able to convince Mr. Atkinson that Anne had borrowed money from her, which he paid her back with thanks for nursing his wife through her last days. In 1862, her mark was Mrs. Sarah Carnell, an older lady living in Marylebone. Catherine successfully persuaded her to change her will in her favour, sealing her fate. Catherine was asked to collect Sarah's medicine from the chemist, and she took the opportunity to pick up a soothing draught, oil of vitriol, sulphuric acid. She poured some of the emollient fluid into a tumbler and handed it to Sarah, who commented that the glass felt warm. Her nurse said, quote, "Drink it down, love, it'll warm you." She took a mouthful and spat it out, saying it burnt her mouth. She called for her husband, who noticed that what Sarah had spat out had burnt a hole in the carpet. For the first time, Catherine had made a mistake, and she fled. She was arrested a couple of days later. The mixture she gave Sarah contained enough sulphuric acid to kill 50 people. She was charged with attempted murder and held by the police as they continued to investigate. She was tried at Marylebone Police Court in April 1862. Her defence at court was that the pharmacist's inexperienced assistant must have made the mistake and given her the wrong bottle. The judge, Mr. Baron Bramwell, scornfully rejected the defence's theory, pointing out that had the lad given her a glass bottle containing sulphuric acid, it would have been red hot and then burst before she was able to get the bottle to the victim's home. Therefore, she must have had the liquid in its own container in her possession. For reasons only known to the jury, they gave Catherine the benefit of the doubt and found her not guilty. However, when she was arrested for the poisoning of Sarah Carnell, she was recognised by Sarah Soames as the woman who had nursed her mother through her final illness some years prior. She had reported the fact to Lincoln police, and they had begun investigating Catherine's nursing activities in more depth. Police exhumed 7 former patients. Post-mortems were carried out on Captain Maw, John Dixon, Anne Atkinson and Maria Soames. Doctors agreed that colchicum seeds had been infused and probably administered to her patients and partners in, quote, health-restoring drinks, such as brandy, wine and tea. She was promptly rearrested by Lincoln Police Force upon her release. She was charged with the murder of 7 patients, but tried for one, Mrs. Maria Soames, who died in 1856, keeping Captain Maw and Anne Atkinson's murder cases in reserve. Had she been acquitted, they would have tried her for another murder until they had got a guilty verdict. Her second trial began on the 25th of September 1862 before Justice Byles. Montague Williams again defended her. Colchicum poisoning evidence was given by toxicologist Alfred Swain Taylor. The defence challenged the doctor's post-mortem results regarding the reliability of detecting this kind of poison after so long. But Alfred was able to explain the science behind the tests as well as detailing the symptoms the poisons caused, which matched previously healthy Maria's illness. That letter, that supposedly was from Maria's lover, jilting her and driving her to suicide, was proven to be in the handwriting of Catherine Wilson. She also forged the IOU for money lent, fabricating the evidence by which she hoped to remove the suspicion of guilt from herself. In his summing up to the jury, the judge said, quote, "Gentlemen, if such a state of things as this are allowed to exist, no living person can sit down to a meal in safety." This time she was found guilty. Catherine in the dock seemed unconcerned, not a flicker of emotion, even when the judge donned the black cap. Mr. Justice Byles commented when passing sentence, quote, "The result upon my mind is that I have no more doubt that you committed the crime than I'd seen it committed with my own eyes." Catherine's death sentence was the first handed down to a woman by the Central Criminal Court in 14 years. And although only convicted for the one murder, it is believed that she committed the 6 others. She was described privately by the judge to her defence lawyer as, quote, "the greatest criminal that ever lived." She was hanged outside Newgate Jail on the 20th of October 1862 by William Calcraft in front of a crowd of 20,000 people. She would be the last woman to be hanged in public in England. Thank you for watching and thank you for supporting my channel. You are so appreciated. Let me know what you think of this case in the comments, and I look forward to welcoming you in the next one.